Good afternoon. Welcome everybody to the final class of the Platform Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch. In this chapter, it's very interesting because he starts off by saying, you men are different from the common lot. After my entering into Parinirvana, each of you will be the Zen master of a certain district. I am going to teach you how to instruct others, so you will not lose the original teaching of our school. And he goes on to talk about how to teach people. And he goes in quite detail and talks about the 18 realms. If you look on page 247, it says the 12 ayatanas are 6 sense objects: sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch, thought. 6 sense organs: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, mind. And then he says the 18 realms are 6 sense objects, we just mentioned, 6 sense organs, and 6 recipient consciousness. That means the consciousness of eyes, consciousness of ears, consciousness of nose, tongue, body, mind. Those 6 consciousness. So 18 realms. 18 different realms. These can all be divided. Of course, we don't usually divide them up because usually we process them into one picture that we call reality. We say, oh, I'm sitting here in this room listening to this lecture. Musimsnim is giving a talk. We're sitting here in the library. There are many books there. This is a reality that we made. We processed. Taking these 18 realms and combining them together. And our brain is working normally. It will combine these 18 realms, put them together, and make this what we call reality. But when our brain really has a problem, for example, if somebody has a stroke, and they have fluid in their brain and some kind of like blood and increasing in a clot, then this all breaks apart. This reality that we constructed falls apart. Our brain works to put this all together, these 18 realms. But if our brain misfunctions, just like I mentioned, somebody has a stroke or somebody starts to die, then these all start to unravel. All come apart. So wise people of old, like the Sixth Patriarch, they understood already that these are 18 different realms. They're called realms because they're actually distinct. Okay, and then he goes on to talk about, on the bottom of this page, the 36 pairs of opposites. And he talks about the 5 external pairs: heaven and earth, sun and moon, bright and dark, yin and yang, fire and water. Then he talks about 12 phenomenologies: speech and dharma, have and have not, matter and not matter, form and no form, taint and the absence of taint, form and emptiness, motion and stillness, purity and foulness, ordinary people and sages, the sangha and the laity, the aged and the young, the big and the small. These are the different pairs that denote phenomenal objects. And then he goes on to talk about 19 pairs that denote the functioning of our true nature: long and short, good and evil, stupid and enlightened, ignorant and wise, agitated and calm, merciful and wicked, abstinent and indulgent, straight and crooked, full and empty, dangerous and safe, defilement and bodhi, permanent and transient, compassionate and cruel, joy and angry, generous and stingy, forward and backward, appearing and disappearing, dharmakaya and a physical body, sambhogakaya and nirmanakaya. Then he says that if you know how to use these 36 pairs, you realize that all the pervading principle that's present in the teaching of all sutras, and whether one is coming in or going out, they are able to avoid all opposites. And he says we need to avoid all the opposites because why do we need to avoid all opposites? Because opposites are always fighting with each other. They're always repelling. Okay. Yeah, sometimes maybe opposites attract. You know, we have like plus and minus magnet, kind of like attract. But once their energy is gone, once this plus and minus magnet energy is worn out, then they just fall down. But usually opposites, they repel each other. Okay, so usually if we have opposites, it's not possible to have harmony. So he talks about using the 36 pairs to avoid the kind of disharmony of opposites. When we talk to others, we should be free from attachment. The functioning of our true nature should be free from attachment. And if you are attached to form, your wrong views will only increase. On the other hand, if you attach to emptiness, your ignorance will increase. So this is a very important point. Don't be attached to form. Don't be attached to emptiness. Both of those are opposites, form and emptiness. So the functioning of our true nature should not be attached to opposites. It should be free from attachment. And those who are attached to emptiness, they talk bad things about the sutras and say that language is unnecessary for study of Buddhism. People who assert that we should not use words or speech are in fact also using words and speech. So that's not completely free. That's still attached. So one of the key kind of teachings that the sixth patriarch gave was same as Diamond Sutra. We started off this class, we talked about Diamond Sutra. Don't be attached to any mind that arises or any object that arises in the mind. So this first teaching is not to be attached to any kind of mind. This was the first teaching we get from the sixth patriarch. But we also see that he uses the opposites to avoid the extremes of coming in or going out. Teach how to avoid all opposites. And this is a little tricky because it's not so clear how we can do that in our everyday life. But in his teaching here to his disciples, he said something very interesting. Whenever a question is put to you, answer it in the negative. If it is an affirmative one, and vice versa, if you are asked about an ordinary man, tell the questioner something about a sage, and vice versa. Now this is very interesting because many times you'll see in a movie or you'll see in a book, somebody will say, "Oh, Master, tell me about my future." And the Master will say, "Then you have to understand your past." And this is how we use the opposites to cancel out the extremes, to cancel out each extreme. So if somebody asks you about an ordinary man, you have to tell them something about a sage, about a wise man. If somebody asks you about a sage, you talk about an ordinary man. This was the way the sixth patriarch encouraged people to use opposites to cancel out the opposite attachment to form. So he used opposite to take away attachment to form. So, for example, if somebody would ask the sixth patriarch about the nature and the natural things, then he would talk to them about what is made by human beings, what's artificial. He used that to find the middle way. The Buddha originally taught the great middle path. right? All of you understand the middle way. So the sixth patriarch used those opposites to bring forth the middle way. So he was very skillful in that way. If somebody came and was interested in enlightenment, he would talk to them about ignorance. He would talk to them about not knowing, ignorance. If somebody came and they talked to him about liberation, I want to get liberation, he said, are you a slave? Are you bound? This is the way he used the opposites to draw them to the middle path. This is a very basic the Zen teaching, and yet it continues even to this day. There are many Zen masters to this day, to even nowadays, who will use this or try to use this in the way that the sixth patriarch did. And if we turn to page 250, 10.8, the sixth patriarch, on the first day of the seventh moon, the patriarch assembled his disciples and said, I am going to leave this world by the eighth moon. So he understood 1 month before his death, before his passing on to nirvana, he understood that he was going. He was already very clear about 1 month later he would die. Now it's very rare to find nowadays people who know 1 month later that they will pass away. How many of us can say that we understand 1 month later we will pass away? This is a very unusual. He said, I am going to leave this world by the eighth moon. Should you have any doubts, please ask me so that I can clear them up for you. You may find no one to teach you after my departure. The sad news moved Fa He and other disciples to tears. Shen Hui, on the other hand, remained unperturbed. So the sixth patriarch was very compassionate. He said to his disciples, if you have any doubts, please ask me so that I can clear them up for you before I die, before I leave this world. And you may find no one to teach you after my departure. But most of his disciples were so moved by this sad news, they were crying. But only one disciple, Shen Hui, he was completely unmoved. He did not cry, he did not shed any tears. Then the patriarch said, young master Shen Hui, he was quite young. Young master Shen Hui is the only one here who has attained that state of mind which sees no difference in good or evil, knows neither sorrow nor happiness, and is unmoved by either praise or blame. You have trained many years on this mountain, and what progress have you made? What are you crying for now? Are you worrying for me because I do not know where I will go? I do know. Otherwise, how could I tell you beforehand what will happen? What really makes you cry is that you do not know where I am going. If you did, there would be no reason for you to cry. In the nature of Dharma, there is intrinsically neither coming nor going, neither appearing nor disappearing. All of you sit down, and let me read you a stanza on reality and illusion, and on motion and quietude. Read it, and your opinion will accord with mine. Practice it, and you will grasp the purpose of our school. So this is a very wonderful point you can see here. Those disciples were crying, and they were unhappy, and he scolded them. He said, you're still, even you trained many years, you are worried for me, but I already know where I will go. And he scolded them. He said, what really makes you cry is that you do not know where I am going. That's the point. They were crying because they didn't really know the nature of their true self. They didn't really know where he was going, and they didn't know where they were going after they died. So if they understood through their training where they were going after they would die, they would not be crying. They would not be all sad and crying for him. So this is a point here. And he said, let's read a stanza. And then they all sat down and they read this poem In all things, nothing is real. If you see something, don't treat it as real. Those who can truly perceive will perceive everything as not real. If you want to realize this reality, don't attach to the falsehood that mind is real. Okay, that's important point. Don't attach to the falsehood that mind is real. We say in Buddhism, mind creates everything, but mind itself is not a real thing. Mind is not a real thing that we can weigh on a scale. It's not some permanent thing that we can show. Where can the real be found? Sentient beings can move, inanimate objects are stationary. If you want to find true not moving, it's a not moving mind in our everyday life. So he talks about a not moving mind in our everyday life. And this true mind that's not moving is truly not moving. And if we don't practice this way, we are like an inanimate object and cannot become Buddha. So the true mind is never moving. The true mind, we say, is an unmoving substance. We say it's our substance. It's never moving, never changing. This is what he's talking about. But they didn't know that, his disciples. So again, he's teaching about that. Because many people take this mind that's changing all the time, this mind, the sixth consciousness, the seventh consciousness, sixth consciousness that we use to make our job, to do our job, to make money, to do all the things that we do, to find good food to eat, to find somebody that we like. They take that as the true, real mind. But this is not the real mind. The real mind is the one that is not moving at all. It's completely unmoving. It's like substance. It's like not changing at all. And those who can distinguish all forms without attachment have attained the highest form of not moving. If you can understand it this way, this is the function of tathata. Followers of the path, you should sincerely and diligently practice with your heart. Even though you are practicing in this Mahayana school, do not attach to any views of life and death. To those with whom we connect and respond, we can talk about the Dharma. As for those whose point of view differs from ours, let us politely put our palms together and thus make them happy. Well, that's very wonderful. Now, many people in Korea don't agree with me when I talk about the Dharma because they're Christian and they say, oh, why don't you believe in Jesus Christ? Why don't you follow Jesus Christ? And even if I talk to them about the Dharma, they say, Jesus is the only way. There's only one way. There's no two ways. There's only one way to rid yourself of your sins. That's through Jesus. And that's what they always say, right? They always say, 오직 예수, right? They always say in Korea, 오직 예수. Now, if I was following the six patriarchs' instructions, what would I do? I would just put my palms together and smile like an angel. Now, do you think they would just go away when I do that? Would they change their view? But it's better than arguing, right? It's much better than arguing and making opposite. To those with whom we connect and respond, we can talk about the Dharma. As for those whose point of view differs from ours, let us politely put our palms together and thus make them happy. Our school originally has no disputes, for they make us lose the meaning of the way. Attaching to argument will block the Dharma gate and subjects our true nature to life and death. So this is the essential teaching of the Zen school. He is right here with the sixth patriarch. He says, our school originally has no disputes, has no arguments. For they make us lose the meaning of the way. If we argue, we lose the meaning of the way. Attaching to arguments will block the Dharma gate and subjects our true nature to life and death. So we lose the Dharma when we argue. We lose the Dharma, and not only that, our true nature falls into life and death. Originally, our true nature, does it have life and death? No. People don't answer. True nature has no life and death. But when we attach to argument and we start to think about things conceptually, then our true nature becomes subject to life and death. This is a point. This is a real point. When we argue, when we believe all the arguments that are going on in our mind, this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad, then we fall into the world of what we think is truly real world. It's real for us, and we're subject to life and death. We're subject to suffering. We're subject to old age and death. But our true self is never getting old, is never getting sick, he never die, and also never born. This is a point, okay? This is Sixth Patriarch's point. This is not to be found through argument or debate. Many people think you can find this through the argument and debate, but it's not to be found. So the beautiful line of the Sixth Patriarch is, let us politely put our palms together and thus make them happy. Well, hopefully they will be happy. It's not always guaranteed they will be happy that we just put our palms together. Maybe they will want to more from us. So this is, in those days, this teaching was very good because people's nature was very simple and very pure. So in those days, it was easy enough that just put your palms together, smile, and people are happy. But nowadays, it's not always the case. Even we put our palms together and we smile, and some people are not happy till they convince you to follow their way. Until they convince that you have converted to their way. And this is a difference between the world we are living in now and the world that Sixth Patriarch lived in. It's a different world. Okay. Then, seeing that the Patriarch would pass away in the near future, Elder Fahai, after bowing twice, he asked, Sir, after you entered into the nirvana, who will be the inheritor of the robe and the dharma? And this was a good question, because as you read before, as you may have heard before, the Sixth Patriarch inherited the robe and the dharma from the Fifth Patriarch. So Fahai asked, who will now get the robe and who will get the dharma? And what the Patriarch said is, all my sermons, all my teachings from the time I preached in Dafan Monastery up till now may be copied for circulation in a volume to be entitled Sutra Spoken on the High Seat of the Treasure of the Dharma. Take good care of it and hand it down from one generation to another for salvation of all sentient beings. He who teaches in accordance with his teaching teaches the correct Dharma. As for the transmission of the robe, this practice is to be discontinued. So he said all his teachings would be put into a book, which became this book. And he said the robe would no longer be handed down. Why? Because the robe became a sort of object that people were arguing over and fighting over. So he decided that it would not be handed down anymore. And until that time, the robe was handed down, but after that, there was no more handing down of the robe and bowls. And he then made a poem and he said, the object of my coming to this land is to transmit the law for the deliverance of those under delusion. One flower opens with 5 petals. The fruit will come naturally. And so this has some meaning, and this is he talks about the 5 petals. That means before him there were 5 patriarchs, and he is the 6th patriarch. And finally, this fruit will come naturally from now on. And on the next page, you see here, he says, my teaching is like a spring rain which moistens a vast land. Your Buddha nature is like a seed. which receives its moisture and grows. One who follows our school's teaching will definitely attain the highest Bodhi. If you practice this way, you will surely realize the supreme fruit. Our mind ground has many seeds. The all-pervading rain causes them to sprout. Once you attain sudden enlightenment, it's like a blooming flower. Then we can reap the fruit of Bodhi. So he talks about the mind ground having many seeds. That means we all have potential for enlightenment in our mind. We all have many kinds of potential in our mind. But according to the conditions, whether we meet a great teacher who can give us this rain, this sweet rain, like spring rain, which moistens the land, according to our conditions, these seeds will sprout or they will not. And of course, if they sprout, then you realize the fruit of Bodhi. Okay, and he goes on to talk about the Dharma. I won't go through all this; it's quite long. But they asked him to stay, and then finally they said, will any calamities occur after your death? Here on page 255. Will any bad things, calamities means bad things. Will any calamities occur after your death? Then the sixth patriarch said, 5 or 6 years after my death, a man will come to cut off my head. Oh. He said, they take my head to pay respect, money to feed a mouth. Mun is the perpetrator. The case is judged by Yang and Lu. So sixth patriarch, he already understood the future. He already understood that 5 or 6 years later after he died, somebody would come and to cut off his head. And then he said, 70 years after my death, 2 bodhisattvas from the east will appear, one a bhikkhu, one a layman. They will build and renovate monasteries, teach the Dharma widely, firmly establishing our school, and transmit the Dharma to numerous successors. So you can see he already understood what would happen 70 years after he died. How did he know that? How did he understand this kind of thing? And he said, then he was asked about how many generations the Dharma has been transmitted since the appearance of the earliest Buddhas up to the present. The Buddhas who have appeared in this world are too many to be counted, replied the patriarch, but let us start with the last 7 Buddhas. And he lists here the last 7 Buddhas. I won't read them all, but these are the last 7 Buddhas of this world. Buddha Vipassan, Buddha Sikyan of the last Kalpa, Buddha Vesabu, and finally Buddha Gautama. Buddha Gautama is Shakyamuni Buddha. But we can really wonder, what's really amazing is, how did the sixth patriarch get this? How did he know this? He cannot read any books. He's illiterate. He did not know Chinese character. How did he understand all the names of these Buddhas of not only this is like Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha was born maybe 500 years before the patriarch. But these Buddhas must have born 1,000 years or 2,000 years or 3,000 years. How did he understand all that? And he could not read. He could not just open a sutra and check, well, who was Buddha there? He could not do that. So we see that he had developed his wisdom, and his intuition had developed to the extent that he understood long time ago those great Buddhas of the past, teachers of the past. He understood also his future. He understood what would happen after he died. And he goes on to list those Buddhas of the last Kalpa, of the present Kalpa, and finally Shakyamuni Buddha. And then from Shakyamuni Buddha, Gautama, the Dharma was, it says here, the law. The law means Dharma, same thing. You know, the Chinese character for law and Dharma are the same. So, from Gautama Buddha, the law was first transmitted to the first patriarch, Mahakashapa. We all know about Mahakashapa. He was the very senior disciple of the Buddha, very old, but he received the Dharma first when the Buddha held up the flower and transmitted it to him. And then to the second patriarch, Ananda, and continues on, and he lists all the patriarchs until the 32nd patriarch. You notice the 28th is Bodhidharma, the first patriarch in China. And then he goes on to list all the patriarchs to the 32nd. I am the 33rd patriarch, the sixth patriarch in China. Thus the Dharma was handed down from one patriarch to another since the beginning. Hereafter you should in turn transmit it to posterity by passing it on from one generation to another so that tradition may be maintained correctly. Are there any questions today?